We're looking at the idea of Jujigatami, the Ambar, from bottom position when we're on our back. Typically, the way we start teaching this is through closed guard. There's other times we can use it, but closed guard is a good place to start our work. Now, throughout this video, one of the big themes that we're coaching is the idea that Jujigatami ultimately is a submission attack on your opponent's elbow. But before any of that can occur, it's got to be a control attack on your opponent's shoulder. Now, when you're operating underneath your opponent, there's a problem. We often refer to this as the shoulder connection problem. How am I going to connect my hips tightly to my opponent's shoulder? Because that's the only way in which I'm going to be able to attack his arm at the elbow, which is my final goal. I have to be able to connect my hips securely to my opponent's shoulder. That's always the first concern whenever I go to attack with Jujigatami. How are you going to do that from bottom position? Because now I have to come up off the floor working against gravity and lock onto a shoulder joint. There is absolutely no question that the number one method of doing this in modern jiu-jitsu, our athletes use it, all the other athletes do too, and there's a reason why, because it's the best method, and this is the top lock. One day, you're going to want to call yourself a master of Jujigatami. Your ability to hit a Jujigatami on a good, skilled opponent from bottom position will be based largely on how good you are at applying the top lock to your opponent. The top lock is, without any question, the number one method in modern day jiu-jitsu of locking securely my hips to his shoulder so we can get the breakthrough at the elbow. You must become a master of this move. Okay? Let's look at it in some depth now. We've got an opponent in our closed guard. Ultimately, we want to break the arm, but our path to that is through the top lock. There's not going to be any top lock action until we can bring his elbow towards our center line. If his elbow is outside my hip, it's almost impossible for me to lock my legs over his shoulder. So our whole first thing is to bring the elbow in towards the center line. Then from here, we go in and we control our training partner at the head. From this position, look how we just take our hips out to the side and we quickly lock over our training partner's shoulder. Initially, I keep the collar tied. It is absolutely critical that we use the top lock. All the time I see people lock their feet and say, oh, I've got a top lock. No. You don't have a top lock until the hips come up. Now you've got a top lock. If my hips drop, the whole purpose of the top lock is lost. Here, Placido can pull his elbow free and move out quite easily. Of course, there's triangle follow-ups. We'll cover that later, don't worry. Okay? But from here, when I lock, if I want to control the arm, the reason I cross my feet behind his back is so I can draw my hips up. Now, my hips are so tight to his shoulder that the shoulder connection problem has been overcome. As my opponent tries to rip his arm free, it locks into my hamstring and adductor muscles, and it's not going anywhere. By keeping my arms in this position, he's now forced to go into a defensive figure four hold. If he doesn't, and he's naive and just keeps his arms out, we'll finish it right here. Okay, either with a Jujigatami or an American long. You take your pick. Okay, so he has to lock up. And it's that which enables us now to make the turn off the shoulders and go into the winning positions that we favor. Okay, so this top lock is absolutely critical. Let's understand something. There's two main ways we can get into the top lock. You've got to become strong at both. Don't sell yourself short here. Don't just have one way of doing it. You're going to get people who recognize what you're doing if you have just one method and start to resist you. There's two ways I can secure my opponent's head. I can use the inside hand to secure the head, and I can use the outside hand. Let's compare them both. Okay, so far we've been doing everything with an inside hand. Okay, we've been tying up our training partner's arm. From here, my inside hand, in this case it's my right hand, was holding onto my opponent's head so that we can lock up and then get our top lock in place. Okay? What about the outside hand? Can I use this? Absolutely. This time, I go across the elbow and I control the elbow with my right hand. Previously, I was using left hand at the elbow, right hand at the collar. Now, we're going to go right hand to the elbow and left hand goes from the outside. Okay, very different. My opponent goes to yank out, and it's a difficult grip to move away from. We shift our hips, and we throw our legs over the top, and once again, we've got that top lock in place. When he goes to yank out, My hips are high. It's so hard for him. And once again, he's forced into a situation where he has to put on the figure of 4. If my opponent's an idiot and doesn't figure 4 his hands, there's no reason why I can't apply a straight lock or an American lock. Okay, so as he applies his arms defensively, once again, we learn to turn everything off the shoulders, and from here we lock up and put our training partner straight down to his back. Okay, so once again, let's contrast these two exceptionally good methods of getting into the top lock. I'll say this again. If you're going to call yourself a master of Judogatame, and that should always be your goal, it's one of the most foundational submissions in the sport, you must have an ability to apply the top lock from bottom position, form a strong connection to your opponent's shoulder, and from there, you're going to start submitting people. Unless you learn to overcome the fundamental shoulder connection problem, the problem of how you're going to attach your hips securely to your opponent's shoulders, you're not going to arm lock anybody from bottom position. Okay? 2 ways to do it: inside hand, outside hand. Let's look at them again. Close guard situation. From here, step number 1, elbow towards the center line. There's no top lock without that. I get 2 choices. I can either block his right elbow with my left hand and go inside hand to the head. That's one good option. From here, we lock in and lock out. Okay, there's my top lock. My hips are high. The lower my hips, the less effective the top lock. Always pushing my hips up to the armpit. My feet pull down on his back, so he feels a crunching effect. As my feet back heel and my hips rise, when he goes to pull his arms out, no hands go. It's impossible for him to pull his arms out. If my legs relax, now it's so easy for him to pull the arms free. Okay. Now, second method. Again, we draw the arm across the center line, but this time it's my right controlling his right, as opposed to left on right. It's now right on right. And now it's my left hand that controls the head instead of inside right hand. Now, as he goes to yank away, it's a very difficult thing. It's a strong grip. From here, I shoot my hips out, and just like before, we lock up that top lock. Again, my feet back heel and pull in. My hips rise, no hands, he goes to yank out, and that's a top lock. That's what's holding him in place. Okay? I look for his reaction. If there's no reaction, he's an idiot, then we go straight on the attack. If he's smart and locks up the figure of 4, that's when we turn off the shoulders and find ourselves with our direction leg pointing the direction we want. My left knee turned in so that we can quickly lock and place our man down on his back, from where all of the most high percentage finishes of the Judogatame position arise. Two ways to attack the top lock: inside hand, outside hand. Make sure you're strong at both. We're looking at Ambar's Judogatame from guard position. One of the absolute most important elements when you're entering into the Judogatame is the relationship between your opponent's head and elbow and your hip. Okay, those 3 things, his head, his elbow, and your hip, will determine how successful you are at getting into Judogatame from bottom position. Let's have a look at some of the keynote themes that I want you to become expert at as we work here. We've got a training partner here in a closed guard situation. Okay, you go to Jiu-Jitsu 101 on YouTube and you'll see armbars typically demonstrated with something like this. Okay, a 2-on-1 grip where I take an over grip on my training partner's elbow, put a hand on my training partner's wrist, and we work from here. Now in a beginner's class, this is just fine because your opponent doesn't know enough to escape. But at advanced levels, this is not going to cut it because there is no control of my opponent's head. Okay, even if I did succeed in bringing my opponent's elbow towards my center line, as his head rises, it becomes impossible for me to control the head, and his elbow starts moving away from my hips, and we lose the whole position. Okay, so there's a sense in which I've got to control his head. That's the key to controlling his posture. But at the same time, I've got to bring his elbow towards my center line. So ideally, what we want is 2 kinds of control: control of the head and his elbow. I want to take his elbow towards my center line, and I want to bring his head down. Ideally, I'm looking to put his head, his forehead in particular, directly over his elbow. That's the ideal. Okay, will you always be able to get that? No, but you want to get as close as you can. That's the ideal that you're striving for. Ultimately, what I want to do is I want to ensure at all times Placido's elbow goes inside my hip. That's the minimum requirement, okay? So the best is when the elbow goes at least to my center line, and the very best is where it goes across the center line. That's almost guaranteed to score you arm bars. But the minimum requirement is that his elbow must be inside my hip. Okay, if I cannot do that, then realistically you can't really expect to hit arm bars on good people. If his elbows stay outside my hips, strong elbow, I can't turn and pivot and get the angle that I need to get into an arm bar. So everything we need to do is bound up the idea of bringing the elbow towards the center line, and the minimum requirement, once again, to get the elbow inside my hip. At the same time, I've got to control his head, so he can't just posture up and away from me. And ideally, I would like to bring his head directly over his own elbow. That's going to make it very easy for me to throw up a top lock and bind my training partner into place. And now you can see the results of our work. I have put his elbow very obviously inside my hip. If he tried to take his elbow outside my hip, it would run directly into my inner leg and hamstring muscles, and it's not going to move. So it's locked in place now. I haven't just gotten the position, I'm now holding it courtesy of this top lock. And from here, it's going to be relatively easy for us to maintain the position we want, get our lower back up off the floor, and then throw our legs into place and get to the arm lock position we're looking for. So once again, our whole thing is to get away from traditional methods where we just use a 2-on-1 control on the arm and do nothing to control the head. It's not going to cut it at elite levels of competition. Okay, you can get that at beginner levels. It's tough to get that on the best people. So what we're typically looking to do is bring everything in towards the center line and then go in and control our training partner's head. Then we're going to get a small angle and we're going to throw our legs up into a top lock. Once that top lock is attained, you see now the elbow is locked well inside my hip. That's always my goal. His elbow inside your hip. Okay. Once we're there, then it's all about that pivot to an angle that brings us around to at least 90 degrees on our opponent, and sometimes even more. From here, my two lower legs point in the same direction, and as a result, it's an easy thing for us to go over the top and get downward pressure on our training partner's head. From here, we have the option of finishing from bottom or putting the man over and finishing from on top. But the key element I want you guys fixating on is this idea that if we're going to enter into Judogatame from bottom position, we've got to do a good job of controlling the head, bringing the elbow to the center line, with the ultimate goal, the minimum goal, of putting his elbow inside my hip. Once it's inside the hip, trust in your top lock to keep it there long enough to get the pivot, turn, and entry into the lock. Now, if you look at international jiu-jitsu in competition to this day, whether it be my students or any other of the leading arm lock specialists out there in the world, you will see that from bottom position, one method of entering Judogatame dominates above all others. And this is the two-step method of entering into Judogatame. It is difficult on a good opponent to directly go from bottom position straight to an arm lock. Yes, you see it a lot at certain levels. It tends to be a move where if you go in one step, you better be quick. Okay, don't worry, we'll come and look at one-step methods shortly. But overwhelmingly, the most successful exponents of Judogatame from bottom position favor the two-step method. The idea is that the central problem of Judogatame is always, how will I connect my hips to my opponent's shoulder? The shoulder connection problem, as we call it. Unquestionably, the top lock is the favored and most successful method in modern day jiu-jitsu. So there's essentially two steps involved here. Step number one of Judogatame from bottom position is get to the top lock. Step number two is apply the Judogatame from there. Why has this become the dominant method of attacking Judogatame? Well, by breaking the Judogatame down into two distinct stages, top lock first, Judogatame second, you exert far greater control over your opponent's shoulder, and you get around one of the common problems associated with Judogatame, which is the movement of your cross-face leg. Let's look at the problem first, and then we'll look at the top lock as the solution to this two-step method, which I want you guys to focus so much upon in your training. Okay, here's, you look at a jiu-jitsu introduction class, you're going to see things like this. Okay, you'll see people lock up an arm, 2 hands on one, foot on the hip, turn to an angle, and then they throw their legs around the corner like so. Okay, and because the guy on top is kind of naive, don't make your body so soft. It works reasonably well. Okay, again, if the guy doesn't really know what an armbar is, you lock on, foot goes on the hip, you find yourself at an angle, you throw your leg over, and there it is. It's done. Okay. The problem here is that when I go to use my cross-face leg, there's a huge amount of space for my opponent to go and just simply pull his arm out by the time I get to the lock. Okay, you could drive a truck through the space between my legs at that point. Okay, pulling an elbow out is going to be a joke. So I lock on, I come out to the side, there's that wide swing, no control of the shoulder whatsoever. There's literally zero control of my training partner's shoulder. No part of my body is in contact with his shoulder. The only thing holding his arm in place is my hands. Okay, your hands may be strong, but they're not strong enough to hold a guy's arm in place. If he pulls with his head and arm together, you're going to lose that arm every time. Okay, the beauty of the top lock is that you break down that swing of the leg into a much, much smaller arc. The wider the arc of my cross-face leg, the easier it is for my opponent to pull his arm free, and he's gone. Okay, your success with Judogatami is largely bound up, particularly from bottom position, controlling the shoulder and reducing the arc of the cross-face leg. I'm going to say that again because it's extremely important. There's 2 ways you're going to fail with Judogatami. You fail to control the shoulder, and you offer too much space in the arc of the cross-face leg. If you can eliminate those 2 errors, you're going to finish a lot of people with Judogatami. Let's have a look at this again. No control of the shoulder, that's terrible. And then a wide arc of the cross-face leg means there is no reason whatsoever. My opponent had to vigorously pull his arm, and he's gone. Okay, and you look around any beginner's class in the United States, you'll see 1,000 examples of this every single day. Now, the beauty of the top lock is it gets us around the first problem. Okay, from here, the top lock enables tremendous control of the shoulder girdle. Okay, now the next big problem you face is the problem of the wide arc. How wide will be the arc of your cross-face leg when it goes from one shoulder to the other? So step number 1 of the 2-step system has been fulfilled. You've gotten to the top lock. Now, from here, my knee is currently on Placido's right shoulder. If I swing the leg around, I've made a wide arc. My opponent can intercept the leg with a hand, or he can just yank his arm out, okay, without even grabbing. Because I made the critical error of a wide arc with the cross-face leg. You must eliminate this error. Okay, I've got to get my knee from one shoulder to the other. The smaller the arc of my cross-face leg, the more people I'm going to submit. So once again, we're here with our training partner, bottom position. We move out to the side and we lock up the top lock. Okay, now from here, you can clearly see my left knee is on Placido's right shoulder. When I turn in, it's stuck there on that shoulder. When he goes to yank the arm free, it's damn hard for him to pull away. But I've got to get it from one shoulder to the other. The smaller my arc, the more success I'm going to have. This is his opportunity. A wide arc, easy for him to intercept, or even just pull his elbow. So I want to reduce that arc as much as possible. So I just bring my knee around in as small a space as possible and lock in over the top to drop him down into a winning position. Okay? Those key elements of breaking the Judogatami down into 2 steps reflect one of the most important skills that you must develop on your path to mastery with Judogatami. Let's make sure that we maximize our chance from bottom position. The 2 things above all that stand out for you as an athlete to try to master are control of the shoulder. The method is the top lock. The other is to reduce the arc of the cross-face leg to the smallest degree possible. You can't eliminate it. It's not going to happen. But you have to reduce it. And the better job you do with that, the more people you're going to submit down on the mat from bottom position with Judogatami. There's a reason why the 2-step method of attacking with Juji from bottom position has become the dominant method, not just for my athletes, but for athletes across the board. In your work towards mastery of Judogatami, you must master it too. Now, we've been looking at the top lock, and we're trying to get you to understand this is without any question the most high percentage way of attacking Jujigatami from bottom position, especially when you're flat on your back from closed guard. What's going to happen when you put your opponent in a top lock? Is he just going to sit there and tolerate it? Of course not. He's going to try and fight his way out. What can he do as far as getting out of a top lock? What kind of resistance do you think you're going to run into when you're trying to apply this on your opponents? Okay. So we know the first step in any top lock is to bring the elbow towards the center line. Okay, your opponent's initial resistance is going to be elbow position. His whole thing is going to be to keep his elbows outside the hips. Okay, so it's important we take his hand to the center line and then the elbow. You don't have to bring it all the way to the center line. Just bring it towards the center line. As long as his elbow is inside my hip, we're ready to go with a top lock. Whether I go inside hand or outside hand, doesn't really matter. Now, from here, I shift my hips a little, and then we throw our legs up, and we lock onto that top lock. What's going to be his reaction? Okay, smart people are going to do this. They're going to take their right shoulder, it's the right shoulder which is locked up in the top lock, towards my right shoulder. And if he can pop his right shoulder towards my shoulder, he can extract his elbow. Okay, remember, once he's in the top lock, he can't go backwards. If he goes backwards, he's going into the lock. So he's got to go forwards. He can't drive forwards towards my head. If he goes forwards towards my head, that doesn't get him out. So he has to go right shoulder to right shoulder. And that gets him out. Okay, so that's the line of resistance you're going to face most of the time with a top lock. So what should I be looking to do? In these situations, as soon as I see him locking up, remember, if he doesn't lock up, just go right on the attack. Okay, I'm going to take my hand from a traditional starting place, like so. Let's move around a little. And from the top lock, I'm going to wedge across my training partner's neck and head. Okay, so that I'm now required to put this hand in to control his arms. As he tries to drive forward on me, my forearm makes it very, very difficult. Now, I don't have the benefit of my right arm inside his leg to help me get an angle. So I've got to learn to turn off the shoulder just with my legs. So from here, there's the turn. That creates the direction leg and gives me a good attacking position ready to go. From here, I can attack either directly with the Jujigatami or go back, switch my arms, and put him down in the usual fashion. You take your pick. So once again, we have an opponent. We bring everything towards the center line. We bring the head under our control, and from here we lock up our initial top lock. We know what he wants to do. He wants to come forward, so I block and I put a wedge in front of his neck. When he tries to go right shoulder to right shoulder, it's a difficult thing, and from here we can get the turn off that we're looking for, and as a result we can either put him down or finish directly from the bottom position. Now, there's going to be times your opponent does punch his arm through. He does succeed in popping his elbow out. Be aware that the only way he can do this is if his shoulder crosses your center line. That's a risky gambit on his part. Anytime his shoulder passes your center line, is back exposure. So, we're here in the top lock. From this position, we're blocking. We're maybe a little late with our legs and forearm, and he pops his arm through successfully. Whenever we see this, we go around the back, and I hug elbow to elbow. My right arm over his right arm. When he goes to recover position, it's a difficult thing. His arm is trapped across the center. I just plant my foot next to his knee, and I bring my right foot up into his right armpit, and now we're in the mounted position. Not only are we in mounted position, we're mounted position with an arm trapped across the center line, and as a result, we're going to get great opportunities to go across into Jujigatami from top position. Once again, from a situation where we have an opponent in the top lock, and I see him coming across. Look how I capture and grip right here. Now from here, I plant my foot next to his knee, and I bring my leg up into something rather like a flower sweep, so that when we come up on our training partner, we're in perfect position to switch our body and go directly into the Jujigatami from top. In this way, we can get around the single most common problem we face with various top lock counters, the shoulder pop, which could feasibly get our opponent's shoulder out of our top lock control. Recognize that when they do so, they offer us certain kinds of opportunities. We can either stop it with a forearm or expose their back if they actually do pop their shoulder free. Now, a big part of our study is Judogatami from bottom position, usually out of closed guard, but there's other forms of guard we can use it from too. I always encourage my athletes, whenever they can, to use the top lock method when they work from bottom position. Nothing else gives so much direct control over your opponent's shoulder girdle as the top lock. Why? Because it's a closed set of wedges. The moment your ankles lock, those wedges around your opponent's head and shoulders become closed. So whenever we have the opportunity to use top locks, I always ask my athletes to make use of them. However, there are going to be times, either because your opponent's moving rapidly or because he's very thick through the shoulder girdle, that you cannot lock a top lock. If you are a shorter-legged athlete, like myself, you often have to make use of an alternative method of controlling the shoulder that we call the shoulder pivot. If I physically cannot lock my ankles in a top lock position around my opponent's shoulder, the next best option will always be a shoulder pivot. Let's look at the distinction and how we can use both to get good arm lock attacks from bottom position. Okay, the method we've spent so much time on from bottom position is the top lock, where we lock our feet around our opponent's shoulder girdle like so. And as a result, our opponent's arm and elbow get locked inside our hip. This enables me to lift my hips up high to my opponent's shoulder so that we form an excellent form of connection to our opponent's shoulder girdle, and it's going to be very difficult for him to turn the arm out. And as a result, from here it becomes very, very easy for us to make that pivot, get our lower back off the ground, and from here we can throw our legs into a winning position. Okay, that's the method we favor the most. Now, there's always going to be times that your opponent is powerfully built through the shoulders, unlike my current training partner. In these circumstances, you may not be able to cross your feet over your opponent's shoulder. So what do we do now? We make use of a shoulder pivot. A shoulder pivot is an open wedge, so it's not as controlling as a top lock. But it doesn't have to be perfectly controlling. It just has to be controlling enough to get the job done. And a shoulder pivot, while not quite as controlling as a top lock, has the advantage of speed. It is a faster method. And short-legged people like myself often can make use of this. So what we do here is we take our legs up and I throw my leg over my opponent's shoulder, but let's say he was so broad through the shoulders I couldn't physically lock my legs. No problem. I just throw my leg over the shoulder and I make the turn off my training partner's shoulder. So his shoulder girdle is controlled to some degree by my back heel. I don't just put my leg lackadaisically over his shoulder. I put my leg over the shoulder and I push down with my leg so that there's an effective connection, so that when he goes to pull the arm out, it's almost as difficult as pulling out of a top lock. And once we get in here, we can continue to make that turn. So at no point did my feet lock, but I turned off his shoulder successfully and I made an excellent connection to him, which will enable me to go into a winning position. Okay, so here we are. We lock up with our training partner. I throw my legs over the top and I just pivot off his shoulder. And as a result, we form almost as good of a connection to our opponent's shoulder girdle as a top lock, but without the need to cross our feet. So if I could, of course I'm going to go the top lock route. It's just a closed wedge. It's a tighter lock. But if I find that's impossible, the next best alternative is this shoulder pivot, where we go through and control our training partner. We bring the legs up and we turn off that shoulder. And that forms a very good pinch, which will enable us to hold him long enough to get the job done. You'll see that even though the wedges here are open, when Placido goes to pull away from me, it's not an easy thing. And the last thing that remains, of course, is that transfer from one shoulder to the other. And we know now the correct way to do this is to make sure our leg goes up so that my knee is higher than his ear. So now when he tries to pull away from us, it's such a difficult thing. You've got a truly strong bite on your opponent. And as a result, you can easily put him down to his back and into a winning position. So this shoulder pivot is probably the single best way of ensuring good control of your opponent's shoulder girdle whenever you can't achieve a top lock, usually due to discrepancies in size between you and your opponent. Now, let's look at one of my absolute favorite things to teach with regards to Judogatami. I say this with a grin because I'm sure that you have the same experience that I've had on so many occasions when you were learning Judogatami and working to finish people. I'm sure you've all had that frustrating experience of taking someone down, passing their guard, working your way through a hierarchy of pins, getting to the mounted position, and then going for an armbar and losing it at the very last second. It's a frustrating experience to put in all that effort and then you feel like you literally had everything in front of you and it's gone. Now you've got to start all over again. It's probably fair to say that I see more armbars lost in the final stages of application than any other area. Very often I'll look around a training room, and I'll see many people getting into armbars quite readily. It's not a difficult thing to do. The basic movements behind Judogatami are not particularly difficult. But the small nitty-gritty details of nailing it all the way through to a successful conclusion, that's where people come unstuck. There's one particular area which often causes students problems, and I want to spend some time on that now. This is the shoulder-to-shoulder transfer. What the hell is the shoulder-to-shoulder transfer? Okay, in any Judogatami, I'll demonstrate it from bottom, but we'll be looking at top position too. In any Judogatami, okay, let's say for example we had a top lock here. I have to transfer my cross-face leg from Placido's right shoulder to his left shoulder. Okay, currently I have a top lock. I do not have the cross-face leg in place. When I start, you'll see that my knee is on my training partner's right shoulder. But at some point, I have to transfer from one shoulder to the other. So now my left knee is on his left shoulder. Okay, so my knee starts on the right shoulder, then it transfers to the left shoulder, and now you have Judogatami. That transfer is the source of a lot of frustration in this sport, because as I make this transfer, inevitably I lose some degree of control of Placido's head and shoulder girdle. When I have everything locked in here, there's quite a bit of pressure on Placido. If he just tried to yank his arm out at this point, it wouldn't be easy. But when I go to make this transfer, inevitably space develops, and that's the very common result. Okay? Transferring from one shoulder to the other is a window of vulnerability that cannot be closed. However, you can close the window to some degree. Your job as an athlete, as a developing athlete, is to close it as much as possible while realizing you can never completely shut it off. I probably see more people, more athletes on a daily basis lose Judogatami in that shoulder-to-shoulder transfer than any other aspect of the move. So it's important, if we know we can't completely close the window, what are we going to do to minimize the draft coming through? Let's have a look at that right now. We're going to look at it in two specific situations: top position and bottom position. Let's start with bottom positions, as we were just demonstrating from there, and let's look at how we can shut this window to the greatest degree possible. We're never going to completely shut it through the use of foot position. Okay, we've got Placido. I'll demonstrate it out of a top lock because that's the one I want you guys mostly using from bottom position. We lock up a top lock. We get everything in place. Now, our first thing, we've got to open the top lock and we've got to get the shoulder pivot, like so. That first shoulder pivot that puts my left knee on Placido's right shoulder is pretty tight. It's a good holding position. I feel like I can sweep him here. I can feel like I can hold his elbow. It's a strong position because my two lower legs are pointing in the same direction. Okay. However, when I go to transfer from one shoulder to the other, inevitably I lose some tightness. How can I minimize that? The key is to focus on the foot above the head. The torso leg is up here. I take the foot of my torso leg and I put it directly over Placido's head. The closer my foot to the back of Placido's head, the more pressure he feels and the less vulnerability there is when I make the shoulder-to-shoulder transfer. The rule here is very, very simple. The further my foot from Placido's head, the worse my shoulder-to-shoulder transfer will be. Placido can physically feel the difference. Here my foot drifts down the back. It's so easy for him to pull free. Now it's a joke. Okay? However, if I lock up and my foot goes here, directly over his head, even when I make the transfer, it won't be easy for him to pull the leg free. So I want to minimize the time and the distance of the transfer. I never swing my leg wide. Now there's too much distance. It's an easy catch on my leg for Placido with his other hand, and even if he didn't do that, it's just a distance through which he can slip his elbow and free himself. So distance is one thing. I never swing wide. Always the leg comes back short and over. Okay? I never go around the head. I go under the head. And we make the catch. The other is time. Once I get in this position, I don't slowly come around the corner and give him extra time to pull his elbow free. It's a fairly quick transition. From here, we go over and make the catch. And the most important thing is this foot of my torso leg, the direction leg as I often refer to it, which pushes down so that even as Placido, as I go to move, even as he goes to pull his arm free, it's not an easy pull. So that when we go over the top and put him down to his back, we're in good position. The single biggest key to whether or not you will control the shoulder-to-shoulder transfer in an adequate fashion from bottom position has to do with your foot position. Keep the foot over the head and keep a downward tension in your leg, and you'll unlock a lot of people, and you won't lose a lot of the locks you're going for. I'm going to give you an additional tip, which I often use when I'm coaching my students. That foot that goes over the head, point your toes. Okay? If you look at a beginner level Osotogari, imagine we had a gi on and you were looking at a beginner level Osotogari. You will always notice an expert in Osotogari, when he goes to reap his training partner's leg, always points his toes downwards. They never come in with a hackneyed looking foot like so. Always, when they go to exert the reaping force, the foot is pointed downward and it creates a strong line of unity through the leg, hamstring and lower back, and as a result, we can easily drive our training partner down. Whenever you want to concert or create a concerted force backwards through the leg, it's always an aid to point the toes. That way you get a unified leg and a strong backward reaping motion. Do the same thing with your jujikatamis. When I start off in here and we get that initial top lock, when I turn the corner, watch my right foot. I point the toes downwards. I don't have my foot like this. Okay? Placido will feel an immediate difference when I do the same reaping motion for an Osotogari with same foot position downwards, like I wanted to physically touch his head. So that when I come around the corner and make the lock, it's tight. When I finish it, watch how my right foot comes down, almost touching my own shin. So when Placido goes to stand up and pull away and all those things that people do, it feels awfully, awfully difficult. And it's relatively simple for us to guide him down to the mat. Okay? Now, that's when we're underneath people. Let's switch topics now to when we're on top of people. How are we going to manage the shoulder-to-shoulder transfer? Whenever we come around the corner, I'll just have Placido's arms up here, and we're in a position to turn on our training partner. Again, we face a similar problem. I've got to transfer my knee from Placido's left shoulder across to his right shoulder. However, Placido's head is on the floor. So when I go to make that transfer, it often feels like I don't make a satisfactory connection with his head, and we fall down with very little cross-face pressure. They follow us up, they pull the elbow out, and they're gone. Okay, I'm sure you've all had that frustrating experience. Let's come back down this way a little bit closer now. So, how do I like to manage this shoulder-to-shoulder transfer? I perform a trick. Let's turn this way so you can see the camera. Perfect. If this knee is off the ground, it's very, very hard for me to make a strong catch on Placido's head. So what I do is I drive my whole shin to the ground. You will hear a change in your training partner's breathing when you do this. It's as though you're sat directly on their diaphragm. So I drive my whole shin down to the floor. When Placido tries to pull the elbow out in this position, it's physically impossible. And the transfer going around is much tighter when we lock in just like so. When he tries to pull away from me, very, very difficult indeed. And now we sit down into a very, very strong and controlling Judogatame. Sorry, Placido, that's an unpleasant thing to have to go through. It makes a big difference if we put our shin on the floor. You will find a much tighter shoulder-to-shoulder transfer from top position, and a much tighter subsequent armbar as well. So we turn the corner on our training partner. There, I'm on Placido's left shoulder. When I go to make the transfer, I drive my whole shin to the mat, so that when I come around the corner, we get a very, very strong bite on our training partner's head. If Placido had to recite the alphabet at this point, there's so much pressure on the diaphragm, it would be difficult for him to do so. Now, we come all the way down to the floor, and we control a very, very tight entry into the Judogatame. These are how I like to manage that critical transfer from one shoulder to the other to minimize the opponent's ability to extract his arm in that rather vulnerable phase of the Judogatame. If there's one truly vulnerable element of the Judy, it's that shoulder-to-shoulder transfer. You can't close off that window of vulnerability, but you can shut it to the greatest degree possible, and that's your goal. We're going to look further into the use of Judogatame from bottom position. One of the big themes of this video is the idea that whenever we work from bottom position, you must see Judogatame not only as a submission hold, but as a potential sweep that can take your opponent from top position and put him on his back and you on top of him. As a general rule, it's usually considerably easier to finish a Judogatame on someone who's down in a supine position, flat on their back, than it is when they're crowding over you, stacking you, and giving you a hard time with their body weight. So very often I encourage students to use Judogatame as a sweep, as a prelude to using it as a submission hold. Now, sweeping someone with Judogatame isn't easy if they know what they're doing. If they're on top and they're well positioned, it's not an easy thing to sweep them. So we need to up our game when it comes to sweeping this guy from bottom position and getting up on top. What are some of the critical elements? Well, let's first start off with a very general training tool in all forms of grappling, and jiu-jitsu is no exception. This is the theory of the clock face. We're just going to have Placido start off in a turtle position. Okay. Whenever someone's in a turtle position, a useful way of understanding directions of force is to use the image of a clock face. So Placido's head would be 12 o'clock. His tailbone would be 6 o'clock. His hip line would be 3 and 9 o'clock. His body covers certain sectors. Let me rephrase that. His limbs cover certain sectors of that clock face. So for example, if Placido wanted to create base between the 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock, he would use his left leg, and he can position his left leg anywhere in that quadrant to create base. So here he's got a certain amount of base. If I were to exert a pushing force, his base of support now is strong. If he put his knee back in and I exerted a pushing force, I might well push him over. Okay, so he accommodates this by putting out a limb in the relevant sector, and now he's got base. Okay, he puts it back down. Now, he puts, let's say I exert a pulling force towards his between 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock, he puts a hand out, and now he can resist me. If he didn't do that, I could quite easily pull him over to a shoulder. Okay, so you can see he has 4 limbs which cover those 4 quadrants. Okay, which cover those areas between 9 and 3, 6 and 3, etc., etc. You must use this kind of thinking, these quadrants and your opponent's bases of support when it's time to sweep people with Jujigatami. Let's have a look at this now in some concrete applications. Placido's in my closed guard. So his body position is roughly similar to turtle position. It's just that instead of being down on his elbows, he's got his hands on my biceps. When I go into Jujigatami and I want to sweep him over, he's going to be using his limbs in ways to make it difficult for me to get that sweep. So I enter into a Juji, like so. Now, if Placido was naive and just kept his 2 knees on the floor, I could just sweep him right from here with very little effort. Okay, just a simple push with my legs would put him down. But if Placido's smart, he's going to put his right leg up. And as a result, he's put out a base of support into which I am now pushing. So when I get into a push on Placido and he pushes back with his right leg, it's me who loses. I get stacked. And as my knees come in towards my nose, it becomes very, very hard for me to finish the Jujigatami. You can even hear my voice changing as he puts pressure on me here. My diaphragm compresses. So, what's gone wrong? The direction of my Jujigatami is going directly into his base of support. Okay? And that's why I'm unable to budge him. And that's why I get stacked very, very easily. And probably he's going to be able to pull his elbow out at some point. What's gone wrong is the direction of force of my Juji is going into his base of support. Now, a quick question for you. How do I know the direction of force of my Jujigatami? It's given to you by a telltale sign. As I'm coaching a room full of athletes working out, I can look across a crowded room and see someone applying a Jujigatami from bottom position, and within 1 or 2 seconds I can ascertain whether it's going to work or not, based upon the direction of force that the athlete is applying upon his opponent. And I can tell from across that crowded room exactly what that direction of force is by one unmistakable sign. Where are his feet pointing? That's where you know the Jujigatami is going. The direction of force of a Jujigatami is always revealed by the direction of your feet. You remember the leg lock series? When we talked about Ashigarami, and the direction of force of an Ashigarami was revealed by the knees. So if I had Placido in a basic Ashigarami, sitting down, from here, the knees reveal the direction of force of an Ashigarami. So as my knees change direction, my opponent's body moves with it. Okay? As we roll through on a training partner, and we come out the other side, now I've got a heel hook going to my left, but my Ashigarami is going to the right, and as a result, we create strong braking forces. So in the case of an Ashigarami, the direction of force is revealed by the knees. But in the case of Jujigatami, it's revealed by the direction of the feet. Let's have a look at this now. We have an opponent here. As we come around, you'll notice my feet are pointing directly towards my opponent's right foot. So as I apply the Jujigatami, I end up pushing into his base of support. Now, what we need to do is get our feet pointing away from his base of support. I can only move my feet so much. So, I'm going to have to change the direction of my hips. As my hips change direction, now you can clearly see my feet are pointing away from my opponent's base of support. So when I apply forces in the direction of those feet, we easily turn our training partner straight down to the mat. And as a result, end up in perfect attacking position. Once again, we throw up a top lock and come around into the Jujigatami. If my feet are pointing towards my opponent's base of support, in this case Placido's right foot, when we get into a pushing contest, I'll always lose. As he pushes back, my legs are not strong enough to deal with his body weight. You can hear my voice changing as he applies pressure, and I get stacked. So our whole thing is to get our feet pointing forwards. The most important foot is this one here, my direction foot. If my direction foot pushes into him, it's a hopeless situation where he just simply stacks me and I get compressed. So I always want my direction foot pointing forwards. But best of all is where both feet point forwards. And the best way for me to do that is to turn my hips underneath them so that my feet are pointing far away from that base of support. And when I go to apply a force to hit my opponent now, it's the easiest thing in the world for me to turn him over and end up in perfect attacking position. If we imagine this, take a fetal position, and imagine you were inside someone's closed guard in an arm lock. So sitting up, like so, sitting up. So imagine he was in an armbar and I was underneath him, and he puts that base of support out from here. If I put a pushing force into his base of support, nothing happens. Okay? But if I have my armbar pulling in here on his arm, and I put a pushing force this way, you will always turn him over and put him on his back. And that's how sweeping occurs in the case of Judogatame. So from a situation where we lock up with a training partner, we draw everything in. From here, you can clearly see my feet are pointing directly into his base of support. So I can't move, it feels like a rock. But the moment we change that and come out, so now my feet are pointing completely away from this base of support. Now it's the easiest thing in the world for us to send him over and end up in a fine Judogatame position. This is the incredibly important rule of the directionality of force of Judogatame. Understand that it's revealed by the direction of your feet. So whenever you feel yourself underneath your opponent getting compressed and stacked, ask yourself this simple question: where's his base of support and where are my feet pointing? If your feet are pointing at his base of support, that's the root of your problem. You've got to start turning underneath them and get those feet pointing forwards, away from your opponent's base of support. And suddenly that athlete who felt so heavy on top of you will be falling on their back, and you'll be attacking a much easier target. I want to put in a small note for you developing athletes on how I coach people to hold their body to increase their performance in Judogatame. This is particularly important when you're first starting off in Judogatame. It'll go throughout your entire career, but it's a simple insight which will make a big difference in your performance, particularly from bottom position. Okay, which is where I think most people struggle a little bit with their first Judogatames. Typically, most people find it a little bit easier to apply them from top, a little bit more difficult from bottom. What I want to do is I want to create a sense in you of a rounded spine. Okay, plus if you just sit in front of me, just like so. The flatter Placido's spine, when he sits back for a Judogatame, you tend to fall like a brick. I'm sorry. You fall like a brick. And that's definitely not conducive to a good Judogatame. When we fall with a flattened spine and fall like a brick, it becomes very, very hard now to throw the legs adequately up into the Judogatame and actually catch your opponent's arm. Okay? What we are looking for here is a deeply rounded spine, so that your spine becomes like the bottom of a rocking chair. This banana-shaped spine enables you to smoothly transfer and come up onto the points of your shoulders, and critically, to get your lower back off the ground. Okay? What I'm looking to do is to coach you guys on the skill of getting your lower back off the ground so your hips can come up to your training partner's armpit. Okay, probably the single biggest cause for failure in jujigatamis is this idea that you don't come adequately up off the floor and chase your opponent's armpit to get them in the lock. So we have to coach the skill of getting the lower back off the floor, the hips as high as possible. And the only way you're going to do that is by having a consciously rounded spine. Interestingly, when you go to finish the jujigatami, your spine will arch and straighten. And so you as an athlete must flow between the rounded spine for entries and maintenance of jujigatami and flattened spine for finishing jujigatami. This is going to be something you must coach your body to do. Now, an interesting question is, how are you going to do this? How do you take someone who's a developing athlete and coach this rounded spine so that they can successfully come up off the floor? I have a couple of training drills which I often run my students through, particularly at beginner and introductory level, and it genuinely helps in jujigatami performance, especially from bottom position. The first one is a falling drill. We have two athletes in front of each other on the knees. One athlete comes out and puts on a collar tie on his training partner, just like so. Okay, we're forehead to forehead. I go over the top. I just put my forearm over Placido's bicep, and I take my own collar tie. So he has a right hand collar tie, I have a right hand collar tie. From here, I put my foot up on the outside. Off that outside foot, I bring my head down to the side, and I throw my body not backwards, but sideways. As I throw my body, my lower back goes out and I start rounding my body. That rounded spine is going to enable me to come up and lock tightly onto my training partner's body so that my hips and lower back come off the floor. If Placido walks away from me, you'll see we have that rounded spine, that rocking chair shape, which enables me to sit into a ball-like shape. And it's this ball-like shape which enables me to come up off the floor, make a connection, and ultimately sweep my opponent down to the mat. So, we start off just like so. We put the outside leg up, and from here, we sit and hook. Off that hook, it's an easy thing for us to put our training partner straight down to the mat. Okay? I'll demonstrate from a different angle. From here, collar tie, this is collar tie, outside foot goes up, and then from here we fall sideways. We throw the catch onto our training partner, and we're in the perfect position now to put him down to the mat, and from there we can go into a finishing position. The big thing that I'm trying to coach you is that we have a rounded spine, we can go up to an opponent. I have to be able to chase my opponent's armpit and get over the head with one leg, and I have to have that rounded spine to both get there and put him back down to the floor. The big mistake that I see many people make, from bottom position especially, is that they chase their opponent's head with their feet and ankles instead of their hips. I want to coach you to lead with your hips with bottom jujigatami. What does that mean? When I start going after my training partners here, look how, if I just come up with my feet and ankles, you always make very weak connections to your opponent. Okay, I haven't done anything to capture my opponent's head. I've simply placed my calf muscle on his neck. So if he vigorously yanked down at this point, it would be very easy to do so. When I come up in situations like this, it's important the hips come up high. Okay, it's the hips coming up which make the connection to him. The ankles come over. They're the last thing involved in the chain. It's the hips rising. I lead with the hips and finish with the ankles. I never come up first with the ankles and make the connection with the ankles. Okay, that will always lead to a very weak and unsatisfactory jujigatami. It's all about my hips coming up and then the ankles coming down. That's what makes a strong connection and enables us to put him down to the floor quite readily. So that's our first sense of how we coach that rounded spine. Second drill, I start bottom side control and I come up off the floor with my lower back and make a solid connection to my opponent and put him down. Again, it requires a rounded spine. So we have Placido on top, side control. We're going to have our arms here in this configuration. We're going to bring everything in close. Our two thumbs go inside his bicep, and we give a bridge and a slip so that my head slips inside his bicep. Now I bring my lower back off the ground. I can do that because my spine is rounded. That rounded spine makes for a good catch, where I lead with my hips and finish with the ankles. We put our training partner down to the mat, and we're in good position to apply the Judogatami. As always, you'll notice we finish with our lower back high off the floor, our hips deep up inside our training partner's armpit, and the ankles coming last step in the chain, pushing down towards the floor so that our feet reveal the force of the Juji. Once again, he's in here, he's got a side pin. First, Loctite Placido. From here, I give a bridge, I slip my head, and then from here, everything comes up. So my lower back starts coming up off the floor. Once the lower back comes off the floor, hold tight. See how my lower back's off the mat? The more he goes to posture up and away from me, the more that lower back will come off the floor. But that's no problem. We can easily put our training partner down and then go in and secure the arm. The key element is this idea of rising off the mat. And the only way I can do that is if my spine is that rocking chair shape, which enables that kind of movement to occur. This is important for both going up to our opponent and bringing him down to the mat. You are not going to do this with a flat spine. You must coach yourself to have that, I know it's probably the exact opposite posture that your mother always wanted you to employ, but it's good for jiu-jitsu. We always want that rounded spine, and it's that which enables us to come up to an opponent and then return him to the mat. So you'll notice, as always, once we go inside, we lead with the hips. The hips go first and make a good catch with my whole lower back off the floor. When he goes to yank away from us, it won't be an easy thing. And now that rounded spine makes for an easy return to the mat and a good chance now to finish the lock. That's how I coach developing athletes, this idea that always we work with that banana-shaped spine, which enables us to both chase our opponent up off the floor and ultimately return him to the mat. You can't do that with a flat spine. Don't lead with the ankles. Come up with the hips first and ankles last. That way you make a good deep bite on our opponent's head and put him down to the floor.
To arm locking, okay? There's a sense in which arm locking, especially from bottom position, is one of the toughest of all our activities, because you're coming up off the floor and you're trying to connect your opponent's head and shoulders with Judogatami, the standard armbar. Okay? It's never an easy thing. Why? Because your opponent is always trying to move the target of your attack further away from you. Okay? Let's clearly understand what is the target of the attack for any Judogatami. Well, there's two targets. One target is for control. The other is for submission. Most people get excited and think, oh, Judogatami, the target is the elbow. And they're thinking, their psychology is all about going after the elbow. But really, the true first target of any Judogatami is your opponent's shoulder girdle. Okay, it's always the shoulder first for control, and then the elbow second for submission. This is the single biggest insight you can ever have with Judogatami. I'll say it again because it's so important. Always, the control target comes first, and the control target is the shoulder. The submission target is the elbow, and that always comes secondarily. So, from here, our whole thing is to move the hand towards the center line, get a hold of our training partner's neck, and shift offline. As a result, we're able to climb and lock a top lock on our training partner. The top lock's whole function is to control my training partner's far shoulder. It forms a strong connection. Now, there's nothing more sad as a coach for me to watch than someone form a good connection to the shoulder and then lose it with lazy legs when their hips drop. When my hips drop, Brian can pull his elbow through and then start to bring the second elbow back, and you've lost everything. Okay? So, it's very important in these situations. Once we secure a top lock over our training partner's shoulder, it's high hips to the shoulder. So when Brian goes to pull his elbow free, it's locked inside my hamstring and abductor muscles. Okay? Now, from here, my opponent has to lock the figure of four. Why? If my opponent is naive and just keeps his hands here, I'll go right after an arm lock without even attempting Judogatami. There's no need. I'll just go right off either an American lock or Judogatami. So my opponent has to lock the figure of four. As soon as we see that, we go through and we start gripping
our own thigh just like so. Now, this is where things start to get interesting. You've got a top lock, good, congratulations, but you're not home yet. The whole problem is I've got to unlock the top lock without sacrificing control of the shoulder. That's the trick behind a good Jujigatami, okay? So we're going to scoot inside our training partner's leg. And now, when I unlock my top lock, there's a tendency most people have to just throw the leg from here. I now lost all the control I had over the shoulder. Everything I worked for is now lost. Brian Glick just yanks his arm free, postures up, and he's gone, okay? You can see what's happening here. The shoulder is the focus of my control, and my opponent's whole gambit is to posture up and away, to take the target further away from us. The beauty of the top lock is that my crossed feet prevent him from doing so. I pull in with my legs like so. He can't move his shoulders away. Okay? But as soon as I let go, that's when the problems start. Now the shoulders move away and we've lost everything. Okay? So what are we going to do? How are we going to progress from a top lock successfully through to the Jujigatami? Well, we're going to do it with a knee turn from this position. Once I get the top lock and we come in here, we pull in with our knees. Watch my left knee. I never lose contact with his body and throw from a top lock to the Jujigatami. Always in these situations, I turn my left knee inwards on my training partner's shoulder. Now the contact with my left knee and the directionality of my right foot pressuring down on my training partner means when he goes to yank his arm free, it's so difficult. Even when he postures up and away, I'd never lose control of the shoulder joint. And as a result, from here, it's a very easy thing for us to go over the top and lock over my training partner's body and into a winning position. I cannot emphasize this enough. I'm going to change the angle now so you guys can see it better from your current position. Okay, here's the central problem we're working with. Once we get in on our training partner's body here, we want the top lock. The only part of the top lock is to bring his hand towards my center line. Now from here, we shift our body out and we throw up our legs. I can do it in stages, or I can do it all in one fell sweep. If my opponent's an idiot and just leaves his arm extended here, I'll just finish with an American or a Juji. So he's got to lock his hands defensively. I bring my hand through. Now, the problem is if I just swing my leg, I lose control of the shoulder joint. Remember what our mantra is. It's control the shoulder first and break the elbow second. Don't cut corners. Don't go straight for the elbow. It's always shoulder first, elbow second. Control, then submission. So from here, watch my left knee turn and rotate. You'll see that my knee rotates into the shoulder. If my knee points outwards, there's no control of the shoulder girdle. My opponent's gone in a second. So my knee turns in. My right foot clamps down. My left knee and my right foot as close together as possible. This greatly reduces my opponent's ability to yank his shoulder and elbow free. As a result, we can go over the top and turn our training partner down into the finishes we favor. Okay? Let's give it a try. Now, the big theme that I'm trying to push on you guys as you make your path towards mastery of Jujigatami and bottom position Jujigatami in particular is that two-step methods have become the most successful method in modern day competition. This is due to the advantages offered by the use of a top lock. It offers greater control of your opponent's shoulder, and it makes for a much smaller arc of your cross-faced leg, giving far fewer opportunities for your opponent to pull his arm free as you're attempting the Jujigatami. Now, as much as I'm an advocate of two-step methods, it's important you understand there are two ways to attack Jujigatami from bottom position. You can either use speed-based methods, where you launch an attack with so much speed that your opponent doesn't have time to counter, or you can use control-based methods, where you put so much control around your opponent's shoulder girdle that even though they know it's coming, they can't stop it. Those will always be the two methods of attack with submission holds, and Jujigatami in particular. You either go through so quickly the guy doesn't have time to react, or you go through with so much control over time, your opponent, even though he knows he should react, physically can't and gets broken. As a general rule, I tend to favor the two-step method. I generally think if you look at modern day competition, you see far more people getting finished with the control-based two-step method than you do with speed-based methods. But that doesn't mean speed-based methods aren't useful. It doesn't mean we should ignore them. The truth is that single-step, faster methods do have a place in the sport, and they still, to this day, figure prominently in modern day competition, both in mixed martial arts and in grappling. So if you're going to call yourself a master of Judogatame one day, and I certainly hope you do, you got to get rid of both. You got to be able to go with speed on the one hand and control on the other. Yes, I fully believe that most of your successful attacks will be control-based. I do believe that. But let's not ignore the importance of these speed-based methods too. Okay? Essentially what we're going to do now is we're going to start looking at Judogatame without a top lock. We're just going to go straight from a closed guard into the Judogatame. One step. Okay? How are we going to do this? Well, one thing doesn't change. We still got to be able to control the shoulder. The problem is we're not allowed to use the top lock to get that control. So how are we going to do it? Well, you don't have to lock a top lock to control the shoulder. There's other ways, okay? From a situation where I control my training partner's arm, just in like so, I can come up and control the head. I can just throw a calf muscle over my training partner's shoulder. So I don't throw the calf and lock my feet. I just throw the calf muscle and I turn off my training partner's shoulder, okay? The shoulder takes the place of the traditional foot on the hip, okay? Why do I favor the shoulder over the hip? When I put my foot on the hip, it creates a wide arc of my cross-faced leg, and my opponent can just pull his arm free and escape. Once again, from a situation where I put my foot on the hip, now there's a wide arc of my cross-faced leg, giving him a lot of opportunity to pull. Why? Because there's nothing touching the shoulder. Instead, I favor situations where we place a calf over the shoulder. When he goes to yank out now, there's contact with the shoulder. It functions almost as well as a top lock. Now I use the shoulder instead of the hip, so that when I turn off, the shoulder girdle is well controlled. And as a result, when he goes to yank his arm free, it's a difficult thing. And then a small arc of the cross-faced leg makes it still more difficult for him to escape, and we get the result we're looking for. So once again, we start off with the training partner in our closed guard, we come up, and we use this speed-based method where I take my calf muscle over the shoulder. I turn off the shoulder instead of the hip. When he goes to yank out, there's so much tightness in there, it's quite a difficult thing. And we get through into a winning situation. Make a stronger body. From here, we go in on our training partner, we get our initial control and turn. And as a result, we get a faster lock into the Judogatame. Okay? So this is one good method of operating. Other good methods from here involve the idea of a simple grip over my training partner's forearm. Okay? Instead of me telling my opponent what I'm about to do by gripping in like so, I simply take my elbow and just place it over his forearm. I pull in with my knees. Okay? I just place my hand inside my training partner's leg, and in one motion I just throw everything up and around the corner. So I went directly from the closed guard directly into place. Okay? So I take my training partner's arm, I lock, and then from here, right from a closed guard, I just throw everything up into a winning position. And from here we go in and score our arm lock. The key idea is that we're replacing control with speed. Statistically, this is a less successful method in modern day competition than control-based methods. But that's not to say they don't have their place. They can work. Okay? However, they do require us to consciously elevate our hips towards our training partner's armpit. I'm going to show you why speed-based methods fail most of the time. It's because of a certain laziness in our hips. If I have an opponent here in my closed guard, and I go for any one of the speed-based methods that we've been looking at, if my hips stay low, there's no connection whatsoever to my training partner's armpit and shoulder, and as a result, it's so easy for him to pull his arms free. Okay? However, if I get control of my training partner, and as I come around the corner, I don't just turn wide, but I physically throw my hips upwards off the floor and make a catch on my training partner, then we can be successful. Okay? So look how my hips don't just go out in an arc, they go out and up. It's that upwards motion that makes a successful catch. The other reason why we often fail with speed-based methods is because my cross-face leg doesn't catch him properly. Too often I see athletes throw and try to catch with a calf muscle. Inadequate. I always want the hollow of my knee to catch over his neck. So when I throw so that my knee goes over the neck, and now I can form an effective lock. I cannot emphasize enough the difference between catching with the calf muscle, which will never get good results, okay? There's a mountain of space for my opponent to pull his arm free, versus catching with the hollow of the knee. When the hollow of the knee comes up, now I can hang off my opponent's arm. When he goes to pull away from me now, even with no hands, it's incredibly difficult. You must have this crystal clear goal in mind with your cross-face leg. The hollow of your knee must connect with the carotid artery of your opponent's neck at a minimum, and preferably the back of his neck. I'm going to show you an experiment now, which will illustrate exactly what I mean. For any given judogatame, when I come around the corner, like so, if I throw my leg and catch with the calf muscle, it's so easy. Make your body strong. From here, I'm going to clamp down with my calf muscle. Go to pull your arm out. It's a joke. Okay? When I come around the corner and I throw over the top so that the hollow of my knee is on top of his neck, now when he goes to pull his arm out, it's almost impossible. Okay? If you're going to call yourself a master of speed-based methods, you have to become adept at catching your opponent's neck with the hollow of your knee. That's your goal every single time. Okay? It's like catching a baseball thrown at you. Okay? When the baseball comes flying in, bang, catch. Okay? The hollow of your knee has to catch his neck. So when I throw my legs into position, look how I come up and over. And there's the hollow of the knee in place. When he goes to yank out, it's impossible. And from here we can easily put him down. This skill of going out there and catching your opponent right on the neck with the hollow of your knee is the key. If you're making contact with the calf muscle, you're going to experience a lot of failure. If you make contact with the hollow of your knee, you're going to experience a lot of success. One more time. From a situation where we start off, I go inside, lock. As soon as my guard opens, my legs don't just come around the corner and then catch any old how. I already have the goal lined up. I've visually identified where I want my knee to land. It's there on top of the neck. So that when my foot goes from a closed guard, it comes around the corner and over the top. I'm climbing with the knee. Now, even with no hands, he goes to yank out and he's locked in place. This is what ensures that the speed-based methods can succeed. Every speed-based method, every judogatame, but the speed-based methods in particular, require you to fix the hollow of your knee directly onto your opponent's top of his neck, regardless of type, okay? So anytime I go into a given judogatame, you see there's that connection, okay? The connection of the hollow of my knee coming up and over. Now when he goes to yank free, it's almost impossible. If, on the other hand, I come around the corner and connect with the calf muscle, this is just a disaster. It's so easy for him to pull his arm free. Okay? So anytime we go to work in these situations, you will see constantly when I use speed-based methods, I always throw and catch. Close guard, throw and catch. Legs split and catch. There's a second, if my opponent opened and pulled his arm now, yes, he would escape. But he's got a second to do it, okay? So regardless of how I hold, whether it be two hands, one hand in the leg, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that my legs initially split from the closed guard, and off the split, I throw everything over the top. Okay? When he goes to yank out, even with no hands, it's done. And from here we come in and we get the finish. So once again, we've got an opponent here in our guard. Look how we just take our legs and split them. I can't have this leg in contact with his body. Now when I try to throw my leg high, my right leg is stopping me. So I need both legs to split. When they split asymmetrically. My right toes point outwards and my left toes point upwards. That asymmetrical split is what enables me to get my leg up to the back of his armpit. And as a result, I can catch over the top of the neck. Now he goes to yank free, and it's very difficult. Okay, one more time. We catch an opponent here in our closed guard. From here, I just throw, and there's the ideal catch. The hollow of my knee over the back of his head. The result, even with no hands on the Judigatame, he can stand up and go to yank his arms free and cannot do it. And in this way, I make up for the lack of control of the shoulder initially with total control of my opponent's head and shoulders once I get to the Judigatame. I'll say this again. From bottom position in particular and Judigatame in general, there's two general ways to attack the Judigatame. I've either got to be very fast or very controlling. If you're going to call yourself a master of Judigatame, be strong at both. Be strong at the speed-based methods, be strong at the control-based methods. Understand that probably, if you're like everybody else, most of your wins are going to come from the control-based methods, but don't sell the speed-based method short. If you know what you're doing and you understand that your cross-faced leg must connect at the hollow of the knee to your opponent's neck, you'll finish a lot of people with them. They're very, very useful. I'm going to go over one of the absolute most important parts of my approach to arm bars from bottom position. I'm going to give you first an insight which will help you out a lot whenever you're attacking arm bars from bottom position. I'm absolutely confident it will have a dramatic effect on your ability to increase your finishing percentages. And I'm also going to give you a very simple test that you can use with your training partners and friends to ascertain whether or not you're succeeding in doing this. I honestly believe that when you see this piece of information I'm about to give you, you will have a significant improvement in your armbar percentages in a relatively short period of time. Whenever I go to work from armbar Judigatame from bottom, the big problem that we face is you're underneath someone, so you're fighting against gravity to make a satisfactory connection to your opponent. You're trying to come up off the floor. So regardless of the method in which I come up from bottom position, when I make the election to come up, I've got to stay up. It's not enough to get to my opponent's shoulder and arm, but I've got to stay there. That's why we favor top locks so much. Okay, this means that I'm covering my opponent's right shoulder with my top lock. You can all see that very clearly. Now, ultimately, in order to go into the Judigatame, I've got to make a transition so that my left knee will go from Placido's right shoulder to his left shoulder. And it's in that transition that most Judigatames are lost. Okay, it's here that space is offered to an opponent. He pulls the elbow, puts a hand inside, does all those things that people do, and you lose a ton of arm bars in this position. Okay, but there's another way you can lose in this position, and that's when you go to reset the cross-face leg. The cross-face leg is my left leg here. It's currently on his right shoulder. When I bring it across to my opponent's left shoulder, people bring it too low. What happens is space develops between my knee, the inside of my knee, and my opponent's neck. And that space means my opponent's head can rise vertically, and there's the result, elbow slippage. Okay? It is absolutely critical that when I work the armbar position, when my left leg transfers from his right shoulder to his left shoulder, this is the iron law that I want you guys to pay attention to and experience a lot of success with. The knee of my cross-face leg must be higher than my opponent's ear. So when I bring my left leg around I don't just lackadaisically place it on his shoulder. I take my cross-face leg and I fire it over my opponent's ear. You can currently see that my left knee is higher than Placido's left ear. When he tries to posture up and move away from me, the connection you make now is very, very strong indeed. Let's contrast this with a situation where his head rises a little and you can clearly see my knee is lower than his ear. Even when I pull down now with my back heel of my leg, when he starts posturing up, you are always going to lose that elbow. He pulls the elbow and it's gone. It is absolutely critical that when we come around the corner, I bring my leg up so that my knee changes level upwards. Don't just bring the knee around. You bring the knee from one shoulder up and over so that my knee is significantly higher than my opponent's ear. The ideal is for me to take the hollow of my knee and touch it on the back of his neck. That's the ideal. So when I come around the corner, I throw my leg over so my knee is over his neck. When he goes to pull away from me now, it's such a tight connection. And as a result, we can easily put that man down to the mat. Now, that's the inside. I want to throw my knee higher than his ear. I want the hollow of my knee on the back of his neck. If you can do this, I promise you the connection that you make to your opponent from bottom position will be significantly better than if you simply transfer a knee from one shoulder to the other. There is a simple test that you can do which will tell you if you're doing this correctly. This is to perform a jujigatame with no hands. Most people think what holds the juji in place is your arm. So most people think it's this arm hooked inside elbow to elbow that holds his arm in place. In fact, it's this, the cross-face leg. When the cross-face leg comes around the corner and throws over the top, when my knee is high, I can take this arm out. We're going to make a little challenge now. As my direction leg clamps down, my knee is higher than his ear. Placido is going to go to pull his arm out. He can even stand up and lift me off the floor. It makes no difference. I won't lose the elbow because I set my knee properly. Let's contrast this with a situation where I set my knee lower than his ear. Here, I'm clamping down just as I was before. But when Placido goes to pull away from me, it's the easiest thing in the world. I can't follow his head. When I bring my knee higher than his ear, not only is it hard for him to actually physically move his head up, but even if the head does move up, my hips come with it. So even when he stands up and picks me up off the floor, you see my whole body moves with his head. Okay? Even with no hands, same thing. He goes to pick me up, and you can clearly see I'm not losing the elbow. My body stays with his head. But the moment my knee goes lower than his ear, now when he goes to posture up, I don't move with the head anymore and he escapes. This is the single biggest insight that I can give you when it's time to control your opponent's posture and get to the finish for jujigatame from bottom position. The great rule here is that my cross-face leg must transfer shoulder to shoulder upwards so that my knee is higher than his ear. And in an ideal world, the hollow of my knee, the inside of my knee, will actually be on the back of his neck. If you can do this, you form a massively stronger connection to your opponent's head and shoulders than you would if you simply do as most people do, which is to transfer one leg from one shoulder to the other. And you can test this so easily by the route of the no hands juji. And if your opponents or training partners rather can pick you up off the floor, pull, and you're not shaking out, you're retaining the elbow, you know you're doing it right. So let's have a look at this just one more time. From a situation where we're working from guard position, we go through, we score our training partner, we throw up a good top lock, and as always, we make that good pivot around the corner, lower legs lined up, and we throw the leg properly. So you can clearly see the knee is higher than the ear. Even now, I take out my arm, he goes to yank out and away, and you see it's a very, very difficult thing. Even when he stands up on me, you've got such a strong connection to your opponent that he's not going to free that elbow. That's absolutely one of the most important insights you can gain in bottom position judogatame. The relationship between the knee of your cross-faced leg and your opponent's neck and ear. Always get your knee higher than his ear, and preferably on the back of his neck, and you will lock into judogatame in a way that it will make escape for your opponent extremely difficult. Now, we've been pushing this idea that from bottom position, and judogatame in general, but particularly in bottom position, there's two basic routes that you can go with your judo attacks. You can go the control-based route, which focus on extreme control of your opponent's shoulder girdle, and you can go for speed-based methods, which are mostly involved with the idea of catching your opponent with the hollow of your knee to your opponent's neck. I want to spend some time now on one of the absolute most controlling methods of attacking with judogatame. This is actually a move that I have a bit of a history with. You may not be aware that when I first came to New York City in the early 1990s, 1991, I worked as a bouncer for my first, more than a decade. I think it was between 11 and 12 years in my early days in New York City. This gave me many opportunities to use jiu-jitsu in a very practical context. At one point, at the time where I was practicing jiu-jitsu, I was asked to work with a friend bouncing in a sports bar. Now, most of the time when I worked as a bouncer, I worked in nightclubs. But I also worked in various other kinds of clubs on occasion too. And this was unusual because I very rarely worked in sports bars. They're not really a kind of place I would normally work. But a friend was like, hey, there's going to be a UFC on tonight. And can you come down and help me work in the bar? I was like, yeah, sure. Now, I was excited, UFC, I get paid to watch the UFC, that's great. That UFC featured a very prominent grappler at that time. Jeremy Horn was fighting. And he was fighting an unknown Australian called Elvis Sinozic. Now, I had grappled Jeremy Horn myself in the academy, came in to train with us on several occasions, and he was very highly regarded in those days. And he was a heavy favorite to win. And when the fight came on, I had grappled him. I was friendly with him and said, let me go inside and watch Jeremy's fight. And I had no idea who this Elvis Sinozic guy was. And he's just some guy from Australia, and they didn't really produce any MMA fighters in those days. So I think I was going to be an easy win for Jeremy Horn. So I'm sitting there watching the show, and to everyone's shock and horror, including mine, Jeremy Horn got arm locked in a very short period of time by an obviously very skilled Elvis Sinozic. Now, even looking across the bar up at the big screen and looking at the armbar, I could see there was something different about this armbar. It was exceptionally tight, and it finished in a very odd looking way. There was no cross-face leg. And like everyone else, I waited for the replay and looked at it, and it was fascinating. Next few weeks, I tried it in the gym and had a lot of success with it. Since that time, I've taught it to all of my students, and they've also had success with it. Years later, I was teaching seminars in Australia, and I ended up teaching a seminar at Elvis Sinozic's school. And we talked about the old days. We were driving his car back home from the seminar, and we were laughing, talking about his what I call a figure four top lock. He has his own name for it, some kind of crazy Australian name. And I said, I learned it that night from you, and we were laughing and talking. I said I taught it to the Ryan brothers, Gordon and Nicky, and they both excel. They're the best I've ever seen at this move. In addition, some of the rivals of my students, in particular a talented 10th Planet student, Nathan Orchard, also uses this move. His setups are a little different. He does them mostly out of rubber guard setups. They're a little different from what I do, but still the finishing position is the same. It's an incredibly effective addition to your arsenal. Now, a word of proviso here. The figure four top lock is one of those moves where it does help if you have long legs. Okay, it's not going to be a move that I personally have short legs. I can do it on people my own size without a problem. But if someone is very broad through the shoulders, it's unlikely that someone like me could hit the move successfully. I'd go for a regular top lock. If you're someone with short, thick legs, it's probably not going to be a favorite move unless your opponent is quite a bit shorter than you. But for those long-legged freaks out there, this is going to be a move that you will absolutely love. Let's have a look at it, the figure 4 top lock. Okay, a regular top lock, we all know, we get the elbow in towards the center line, and from this position, we lock up over the shoulder like so. Very often, my opponent will go into a defensive structure. Remember, if your opponent's an idiot, then there's no reason why we can't just attack with either American or Judy straight out of this position. So the onus is on him to lock up defensively. Okay? From this situation, I'm going to take my direction leg in this situation. I'm going to take the direction leg and I'm going to pass it over my training partner's tricep. Try to avoid going behind the shoulder. That will require you to have extremely long legs. If you're very long-legged, you can get away with that. Someone like me can't. Okay? So from this situation, we're going to push the elbow across, and look how from this situation, I just take my calf muscle over his shoulder. Make your body strong. And then from this situation, my foot touches my own knee. Okay, that's critical. If there's no contact of my foot to my knee, it's hard for me to get a strong finish from here. So I just pull my foot to my own knee. And as a result, I can lock the figure of 4 around my opponent's shoulder girdle. Quite often from here, there's a need for an adjustment with the hands. That's fine. I always recommend you do that. Get comfortable. Now, you have something like a triangle locked over both of your opponent's shoulders. When he goes to yank his arms out of here, good luck. It ain't coming anywhere. It's stuck. Okay, you got to trust me on this. Now, all that's required is that I take his defensive arm and clear it out of the way and put it underneath my arm. That leaves this arm here stuck in place. There's no need for a cross-face leg. When he tries to defend his arm, there's literally nothing left to defend it with. We connect it down to the chest and we hit the break right from here. Okay? It's a phenomenally strong hold and break. Let's look at it from another angle. So, we have an opponent here in our closed guard. The method of entry which I favor is a regular top lock into the figure 4 top lock. There are other methods based on things like rubber guard, for example, which are also very effective. But this one I believe is for most people the simplest and the most versatile. It's the one which I use, the one which I coach. So, from a situation where we go in on our training partner, we draw him in and we hit an initial top lock. Now, I create a dilemma in my opponent. If he doesn't do anything to defend his arms, I attack with a regular top lock. So he has to lock up the figure of 4. Okay? From this general situation, I need to get my calf muscle over his shoulder. So I switch my arms. My hand goes in place, and look how from here I place my calf muscle. Make a strong body. I place my calf muscle over his shoulder. Okay? And as a result, I can now lock an initial triangle with my legs and then hand adjust it. Now, you can see his shoulder is covered by my leg. If you can physically see his shoulder, it's going to require extremely long legs on your part to hit the move successfully. So always what we want to do in these situations is cover his shoulder with our legs. Make the hand adjustment. From here he goes to yank his arms out. Even with no hands, it's impossible. Now, we clear the first arm out of our way, leaving us the second arm to be attacked. There's nothing left for him to defend with. Okay? Once again. We have an opponent here in front of us. We go in, we score a basic top lock. From here, we go in and connect, always looking to get our calf muscle over his shoulder. As a result, it's an easy thing for us to go through and lock up the figure of 4. His entire shoulder girdle is now controlled. When he goes to yank out, difficult. Even if he stands up, it means very little. Okay? Now, we clear the arm across, arms go in, and there's our finish. Okay? It's an incredibly strong and controlling way to tie up your opponent's entire shoulder line. It has an obvious advantage over a regular top lock. Instead of just controlling one shoulder, it controls both at the same time. Moreover, instead of just having crossed feet to reinforce the wedges, it relies on a full figure of 4, a much stronger way of locking the wedges in place. It creates the ultimate closed wedge around your opponent's entire shoulder girdle. A natural question to ask is, well, if this is so damn good and it has all these mechanical advantages, why don't you see it more often? Well, the setup does take a little longer, and yes, it does rely a little more on leg length than regular top locks do. So when it is applied, it's incredibly effective, but the application is somewhat more difficult. I'm going to leave it up to you guys based upon your body types and your training as to which one you go to favor. I think it's fair to say the vast majority of people find single top locks or regular top locks a little easier to get into and good enough to get the job done. The figure 4 top lock is mechanically much stronger but more difficult to get into. If you feel your body type is well suited to the move, I would strongly recommend a study of this move as a great way for you to enhance your bottom jujigatami attacks. We've been looking at jujigatami from bottom position. So far, all of our attacks have been where we were down on our back in a supine position, and most of them have been from a closed guard situation. Everything we've done so far has had certain kinds of patterns involved. The idea of a step-by-step method where our first concern was to bring our opponent's elbow towards the center line. That enabled us to go into various kinds of top lock, figure 4 top locks, regular top locks, etc., and control our opponent's shoulder. Or, alternatively, use the speed-based method where we threw our legs and caught our training partner's neck with the hollow of our knee. I'm going to show you now a jujigatami that breaks that pattern. Here, we're going to deliberately keep our opponent's arm away from the center line, the exact opposite of everything I've shown you so far. In order to do this, we're going to have to employ a different gripping methodology. The grip that we're going to employ, I often refer to as an overwrap. That's an overhook where instead of hooking around my opponent's shoulder, I hook over the elbow. So for example, this would be an overhook. The same grip you use all the time. My arm hooked in place like so. An overwrap is where I hold the elbow and I cover the forearm instead of the triceps and armpit. So an overhook controls my training partner's tricep, an overwrap controls the elbow and forearm. Okay? And this grip can be a very, very useful thing for our jujigatamis. Now, the beauty of this overwrap grip is that it means I never have to get a 2-on-1 grip on my opponent's arm and bring his elbow towards the center line. So what do you think is the result? Your opponent doesn't get to see the setup. Normally, if I go into a jujigatami, if my opponent has any knowledge whatsoever, the moment I start getting grips like this, it's pretty obvious what my intention is. Okay, anyone who's had even a few lessons of jiu-jitsu should know there's an armbar danger now. The moment he starts seeing feet on the hips, etc., the warning light should be going off in his head. Okay, he's going for an armbar, and he's going to start pulling away. We're going to use a different approach. My opponent starts hands on biceps, and like so. I'm going to thread my hands into the inside position. It's very important when we take inside position, I never just bring my hands in, like so. Now, Placido can pommel his hands back into the inside position. It's important that once I take an inside position, I bring my hands up to my shoulders. So I took the inside position, and when he tries to take it back, there's nothing to do. There's nothing to take. Then I just pull him with my legs, and I force his hands to the mat. So once again, he has the inside position. I pommel in 1, I pommel in 2, and I pull with my legs, and I get his hands to the floor. The moment that happens, I take my 2 hands. One is going to go elbow deep around the neck, and the other goes hand inside the bicep. From here, I'm going to start an action of shifting my hips out and getting onto my side and relocking my guard. What this does is it traps his arm between my elbow and my hip. So when Placido goes to pull his right arm out, it's not going anywhere. Now I take my right hand and I scoop it inside his leg. I take my legs and I throw my body all the way around the corner. My leg catches over his neck. I turn my thumb down and pull my arm out. When Placido goes to pull his arm free, it's impossible. And from here, we get a particularly strong form of arm lock. Let's have a look at it from a different angle. Again, I start by stealing the inside position. I come in 1, 2, and I pull in with my legs. As a result, I can quickly come up and take the headlock and bicep tie. I shift my hips out to the side. My right hand goes in as a scoop grip inside his legs. And then from here, I learn to throw my legs around the corner. This forms an extreme wedge between my left arm, my left leg, and my left elbow. When he goes to yank out, he goes right into a particularly punishing form of judogatami. Why is it particularly punishing? Because it involves this overarm grip, where his elbow gets caught directly on my hip, and we get a very severe break. So once again, we go through 1 and 2. We draw him forwards. I put my hands into this position here. Headlock, bicep tie. I shift my hips out to the side. I get my scoop grip in place, and then from here, everything goes around the corner. When he goes to yank away, he leaves me what I really wanted. There's my direction foot. There's my cross face. When he goes to twist out, turn out, it's impossible. When he tries to connect his arms into a defensive frame, one arm can't access the other. And as a result, we get a very, very strong form of arm lock. This alternative method of locking the arm from closed guard can be a very valuable addition to your arsenal. It conveys very little warning to your opponent what your intentions are. At no point do you grip his arm and tell him armbar's coming next. All he sees is a change in angle, and by the time he tries to pull the arm free, it's too late. Let's switch our focus. We've been looking at judogatami from bottom position, mostly from closed guard so far, when our opponent was down on 2 knees. The higher you go in the sport of jiu-jitsu, the more you'll have opponents who try to stand up in your closed guard. That's a smart move on their part, because generally, if I stand up in my opponent's closed guard, it's a much easier task for me to open their closed guard and get on with the business of passing than it is for me to do that while I'm down on my knees. It is absolutely critical, therefore, that we become strong at attacking the judogatami position when our opponent goes to stand up in our closed guard. Now, in order to be effective with this, you guys need to learn a fundamental rule of judogatami. This is a rule so important that it cannot be ignored, and it will basically determine how you choose to attack your opponent with judogatami when they stand up in your closed guard. What is this rule? Place it to stick a standing position. From here, he's in base, just like so. Let's make a distinction between vertical posture. My opponent is currently in a vertical posture. His shoulders are directly over his hip. And a bent over posture, where his shoulders are currently at the same height as his hips. Okay? Then, going beyond where his hips are, his head goes lower than his hips. Okay? So there's 3 phases of standing up. There's vertical, horizontal, and below horizontal. Okay? When I go to attack judogatami on someone in my closed guard, I always, as much as possible, want to put them so their head is below horizontal. Okay? That's extremely important. We're going to look at this right now. Bear in mind, there's going to be times you cannot get your opponent's head below horizontal. Don't worry, I'll show you how to deal with that very soon. But first, let's look at the optimal situation where my opponent's head is lower than his hips. The rule of thumb is this: if his head is lower than his hips, don't wait, go straight into judogatami. Use the top lock. So, we have an opponent here in our closed guard. Okay? First, a few things when someone goes to stand up in my closed guard. If my legs are simply relaxed and light, he can stand up in good posture and quickly go into vertical posture. And now he has an excellent chance of opening my closed guard without a problem. Okay? So when someone goes to stand up in my closed guard, I play a trick. They put one leg up, I accept that. But when it's time to bring the second leg up, I pull in with my knees. Go back down. From your perspective, watching this, you didn't really see anything happen. And you're like, why did he have a hard time standing up? Okay, let's have a look at it again. He puts a leg up. He goes to stand up the second leg. And he looks feeble. go back, as opposed to a situation where my legs are relaxed, where he has no problem standing up into a vertical posture. So, what's going on here? As he goes to put the first leg up, when he goes to put the second leg up, there's going to be a change, go back down, there's going to be a change in his center of gravity. Watch his head. His head moves forward and I pull in with my legs. As he goes to put the second leg up, my legs pull. Now, he's going to try to fight his way up to a vertical posture. It feels like I weigh 1,000 pounds. Now, obviously I don't weigh 1,000 pounds, but I feel like it because I'm pulling in at a high point on the lever of his spine. As he goes up, look how my knees come up towards his shoulders. As he goes up to vertical posture, it's just me pulling in. Now, go to stand up. You can hear my voice is not really changing very much. I'm not under much stress. But when Placido goes to work here, he feels like he's lifting 1,000 pounds. But you hear my voice is barely straining at all. And I'm holding him effortlessly in place. And as a result, I can easily access Placido's head. And that's all I need. Back down. Essentially what I do is I want to get away from this miserable situation. So often I see people in jiu-jitsu doing this. Trying to grab people's heads. He postures up. You're trying to pull heads down. His hands are on your chest. And I see this all day. Okay? I don't know why people fight so hard to control the head in this feeble fashion. Okay? I just bring my knees to my chest. He goes to stand. And his head comes right to me. I use my legs to access his head. Back down. Anytime you try to come up off the floor, posture up, and grab people, you can hear my voice straining as I try to come up. And then you have to end up in these silly situations when you're trying to pull people down to the mat. He's posturing up, and the whole thing's a disaster. Okay? Make it easy on yourself. He goes to stand up. Just pull it with your legs. And now you access the head every time. Okay? As I access the head, every time I see him going inside my arms with his hands, I just learn to pommel. He goes inside on the other side, and I can easily maintain grips on his head. So every time he breaks a grip, I come in on the other side. He breaks a grip, I come in on the other side. He breaks a grip, and I can just stay stuck on his head the whole time. Okay? Now as his hands come into the center, and he tries to posture up and pull away from me, look, I'm just locked onto my opponent's head. From here, I'm going to walk my feet down his spine. Why is it so easy for me? It's easy because his head is lower than his hips. And as a result, I can easily walk down the spine and lock up a top lock. He goes to yank away from me, and it's so difficult. Now, we start scooping inside his leg and getting our hand in place. And from here, we're in the perfect situation to turn off the shoulder. As a result, when he tries to yank his arms free, it's almost impossible. Now from here, my leg passes over the top. He tries to posture up and away, and look how my hand tries to posture up and away. Look how my hand goes from one leg across to the other. And as a result, we effortlessly put him down. Let's have a look at that whole sequence again. The big rule that we're trying to impose upon you is this. If I want to attack a Judogatami on a standing opponent, I must put his head lower than his hips. If I ever create a scenario where his hips are lower than his head, Judogatami is on. You go straight in and you attack the Judogatami. It's there every time. Put him under serious threat. You either get it, or if he does get out, he's nervous as hell. Okay? So once again, closed guard scenario. He's got hands on biceps. He's got inside position. He stands up. We pull in with the legs. I access the head. There's probably going to be a hand fight here. Okay? Fight. Go. I control the head. At some point in that hand fight, I start to walk my legs down his spine. It's so easy because I'm walking downhill. Okay? Look, his head is lower than his hips. So my walk is downhill to the top lock. He goes to yank out. It's so difficult. Okay? From here, if he doesn't defend his arms, I'll finish it right here. So he's got to lock the figure of four. I scoop inside his leg and start the action of turning. Okay? From here, I apply the juji. Then my right hand goes from inside scoop all the way around the corner to an outside scoop. And as a result, we easily place him down on the mat and we get the finish. From another angle. We're in position. He goes to stand. We're pulling in with the legs. He puts hands inside, and there's probably going to be a hand fight as we access the head. Okay? From here, look how easily, as he goes to yank away, look how easily, by keeping the head below the hips, I can walk downhill into the top lock. Then from here, we scoop inside the leg, stand up straight. From here, my leg passes over the top. We've got the juji position. My hand repositions so that I can take an outside scoop grip and place my training partner down into a winning position. This method of identifying the prerequisites for a successful top lock is the key to success when someone starts to stand up in your closed guard. The number one thing that you must observe in your opponent: where is his head in relation to his hips? I'll say that again, it's extremely important. Where is your opponent's head in relation to his hips? There's only three possibilities. Either his head is above his hips, anywhere around here, where Judogatame is going to be very difficult. It is level with his hips, which is kind of neutral. You can probably get him here, maybe not. Or it is below his hips, where you can almost certainly get your opponent. If you can bring his head lower than his hips, you can walk your feet downhill to a top lock. It's easy. Then from there, you make the usual adjustments and go into the Judogatame and topple him down. I generally recommend put him on his back when he's standing over you. You can finish it when he's standing above you, but it's easier when you sweep him down first and finish from top position.